Taking out the trash, taking out the trash. Got a new trash bag, got a new trash bag. Hey, Joe here from Home Studio Corner. Gonna keep this quick today because I'm gonna solve a problem for you and you can go back to mixing. The question, of course, as you've already seen from the title of this video, is how do you mix virtual instruments? I get this question all the time. And like all the time. It's one of the most common questions I get. And it goes something like this. Hey, you talk a lot about mixing real drums, recorded drums, or real whatever. How do you approach fake drums? So things like Superior Drummer, Virtual, all the different virtual drumming softwares out there. And there's an underlying assumption that I do it differently. And the answer is there are maybe some differences, but I don't think about it differently. So in this video, I'm going to talk to you about how to think about mixing virtual instruments in a way that should be liberating for you and allow you to just get back to making music. And you might find that your life is actually easier than you thought it was. You were just making it hard on yourself. First, let's talk about the wrong way to approach this. I mentioned this in a recent video, but it's worth repeating because we're forgetful people and we tend to forget the important things. So when you sit down to mix something, if you've got this dialogue in your brain that says, well, I saw Joe said you should always put this EQ on this thing, just stop. First of all, I would never say that. And if I have, come and let me know so I can punch myself in the face. There are no hard and fast rules. There are good principles. There are things that I do often in mixes. But so many people come to me and say, hey, I heard that you have to always do this. And it makes me angry because this is music. This is creativity. That's like me saying, hey, I heard you should always write songs in the key of G. No. So it's not a dumb question, it's not a bad question, it's an understandable question, but it's moving in the wrong direction. If you're coming from a standpoint of give me a formula for exactly what to do to these things, I'm not going to give you one, but I will give you a mindset, a way to think about mixing that will help you whether you're mixing really well recorded drums recorded in a home studio, or virtual drums that you programmed in Superior Drummer. Okay, let's dive in. Couple of points I want to make. Number one, if it sounds good, it is good. I was talking to a friend who I have a sneaky suspicion he's produced some big acts over the years, like monster acts. I have yet to ask because I just want to play it cool. But he said the other day, if it sounds good, it is good. And we were talking about how, I mentioned my pedal board the other day. That M9 that I have from Line 6 is super old and theoretically shouldn't sound good. Like there's so many better pedals out there that have better sound. I love the sounds that I get out of it. Not all of them, but a lot of them I love a lot. So if it sounds good, it is good. How does that apply to mixing virtual drums, for example? If you've got this killer kick drum sound that just came stock out of the plugin and you've done nothing to it and it sounds amazing and it's working in the mix and working in the song, great. Don't do anything to it. If it sounds good, it is good. Leave it alone. Now you may think I'm just saying that to be cute because I'm so cute. But no, there have been mixes that I've done recently where I get to the end of the mix and I'm sending it to the client, or one was for Dueling mixes where I'm doing my video showing how I mix the song, and I go and look at the drums and I had almost nothing on the drums. Why? Because they sounded good. Nothing ever raised its hand and said, hey, this isn't sounding right. It just felt good. It worked for the song. The way it was recorded worked for the song. I had some bus processing on the drum bus that got it sounding pretty good, and I just never went back and did anything to the kick drum or the snare drum, and it worked. That's not wrong. It worked. And it was easy. So, one, if it sounds good, it is good. Number two, get it right at the source, the thing I talk about all the time. That applies to virtual instruments as well. Probably more so than recording, or at least it's as important. Here's what I mean. If you are going for a rock song and you want a big, thick snare drum, but you pull up years ago, everyone who used Easy Drummer, all their mixes sound the same because they used that same stock kit that had this really bright, snappy snare drum. I did it too. If you want a big, thick snare drum sound, don't use the thin, snappy snare drum sound in your drum software. You're going to want to change that out for a different snare sound. It's no different than when we're in the studio. When I record drums with Tim Horsley, he always has at least 2, usually 3 or more snare drums available. So he can say, hey, what's this song? Okay, what kind of vibe are you going for? I think this other snare drum would work better. And we set it down and we listen and it sounds great. Or that's not quite right. That's too ringy and metallic. We want something with a little more thickness, a little more woody sounding. So he grabs a wooden snare instead of the metal one. It's that kind of thing. That happens in the studios all the time. Blackbird Studio here in Nashville, Rumor has it they have hundreds of snare drums to choose from, because that's the most important. Imagine that. The most important aspect of getting a great snare drum sound is the snare drum itself. So when you're doing virtual instruments, virtual drums, chances are you've got a lot of different snare drums to choose from. Don't waste 3 days listening to every single snare drum sample. Just if you have one and you're thinking, it's too thin and snappy, I want something thick, then swap it out. Or if you have one that's really thick and you're wanting more of a snappy sort of snare sound, try swapping that out. Don't think, I can just EQ that later to make it sound like a different snare drum. If you can make it sound like you want it to sound now, during the recording phase, during the capture phase, during the source phase, that's always a better solution, okay? Third thing I want to talk about is a simple way to mix anything. This is a simple little process that I use over and over and over and over and over again when I mix a song, and it works for when I'm thinking about globally the entire mix and the way it sounds, or when I'm thinking about the drum mix, or when I'm thinking about specifically the snare drum. I use this process over and over and over again, and it's super simple, but it's super effective. First thing I do is I ask myself the question, do I like the way this sounds? And the answer is going to be yes or no. If the answer is yes, there's a good chance I don't have to do anything. If the answer is no, then I kind of go down and ask myself a few more questions. And the first one is, do I like the EQ balance of this track? Does it sound balanced, lows, mids, and highs to me? Now, balance doesn't mean even, it just means balance. I've talked about this before. If it's a snare drum, does it have too much in that kind of 400 hertz mid-range and not enough bottom end and not quite enough top end in the mix? Now, this is after I've done a good job of getting it right at the source. So the snare drum should be in the ballpark of what I want it to sound like anyway, because I did a good job back when I was picking the snare drum sample. Don't save it until later to change your samples later. Pick it early and then stick with it. Anyway, but what is it about it in the mix? Is it a little too thick? Is it a little too thin? Is it too bright? Is it whatever that is? And then if there are things that I don't like about the balance with the frequencies, I'll use some EQ to adjust those until I do. If I do like the balance and frequencies, or if once I've EQ'd it and now I like it, the next question is, how do I like the dynamic balance? In other words, does it need compression or not? That's what I'm saying. Does it stay even throughout the song, or do I need a little compression to help it stay there? Or is it a great sounding snare, but I really want a rock snare, and you just almost can't get a rock snare without some slam and compression on that puppy? Let's try some compression on there. And then we dial that in and get that sounding how I want it to sound. Truly, that's 80% of what I'm doing during a mix. The other 20% is things like, does it need delay or reverb? Fixing specific problems like sibilance, and using other tools like distortions and multi-band compressors and all the other kind of fun stuff that makes for a really fun video. But the core of what we do, 80% of the time, probably more, is levels, EQ, compression. Get it right at the source, get the levels right, get it balanced, compress it a little bit if it needs it, lather, rinse, and repeat. By the way, that little formula I just shared with you, that works no matter what you're mixing. Fake drums, real drums, I don't care. Inside Dueling mixes, for example, where we mix a new song every month, a lot of months, I don't know, I'm just getting raw WAV files, and I don't know if it's real drums or fake drums. A lot of times I can tell, sometimes I can't. Guess what? Doesn't matter. I mix it the same way. The specific decisions I make might be different. I might not EQ that kick drum because it already sounds good, or I might EQ it to get a little bit of a different tone than what the sample is because I would have chosen a little bit thicker kick drum, for example. And I might not compress the overall kit as much because it already sounds good, it already has that compression built into the sound. But that doesn't mean I'm not abandoning my way of mixing. I'm mixing it the same way I mix everything. I'm asking those questions, and then based on my answers to those questions, I'm making some adjustments, or I'm leaving it alone because, you know what? It already sounds good. Speaking of Dueling mixes, if you haven't checked it out, it's been around for a long time, but it is still one of the funnest things that I get to do. Graham Cochran and I, you may have heard of Graham. Have you heard of Graham? Of course you've heard of Graham. We started this in 2012, and we've mixed one song a month since then. You can join at any point, and you can dive right in, start mixing this month's song, which is a really fun song with a lot of cool different sections and just there's a lot of fun stuff to do. And then when you get done with that one, you can go into the back catalog and pick a few songs, a few of my songs, a few of Graham's songs, and then dozens, literally dozens, like over 70, I think, other songs that you can pick and choose and mix. And if you get stuck, you can watch my video, see how I mixed it. You can watch Graham's video, see how he mixed it. You can listen to both of our mixes and compare them to yours. I wish everyone who ever attempts to mix a song knew about Dueling mixes, because it is such a cool resource. I wish I had it when I was learning how to mix, because I would get feedback like, your drums are boxy. And I'd say, okay, what does that mean? and we've moved on, and I never find out. So now I can listen to, if I had dueling mixes, I could do my mix and I could listen to Graham's mix and be like, he had the same tracks I did, but his drums sound way different. Let me go watch his video, see how he mixed. Oh, okay. So he used an EQ on his drum bus and he cut a big cutout around 400 hertz. That's what was giving me that boxy sound that someone was telling me I had. And then I go do that on my mix and I say, my drums are sounding a lot like Graham's. This is awesome. This is awesome. I'm good at mixing. I'm gonna go mix another song. That's the idea. That's what happens inside of Dueling Mixes. So if you haven't checked it out, there's a free trial. There's no reason not to try it. Go to duelingmixes.com. You can try it out for 2 weeks. If you like it, stick around. If you don't. Either way, I'm thankful for you, and I'm done with this video. Thanks for watching.